won't be, I will not be teaching next week. We are going back to New York. Our kids asked us if we could come and watch their kids for a few days so that they could have a break. They've been with their kids 24/7 for a year and a half and or almost a year and a half, and they could use a little bit of a break. So I was happy that they felt confident in us and that the kids were willing to have us. So we're going to head back to New York next Tuesday. So we will not be meeting next Tuesday, but if someone could remind me to announce at the end in case there are other people who join us, then that would be great. Okay, this week's parsha is Parashat Korach. It was my bat mitzvah parsha. Last week was my birth parsha, but I didn't have my bat mitzvah on my birthday. That's, I don't know why. It was like in those days, weren't paying so much attention to all that. But anyway, so Parashat Korach is, if anyone's familiar with that, it's the story of Korach. He really fomented a rebellion against Moshe and Aaron's leadership. He made it sound like he was in favor of the popular everyday person. Really, he just wanted to be in charge. It was fueled by jealousy. And he felt that he should have been the leader of the Jewish people. And when he wasn't selected to be Moshe, to be the leader, he thought at least he should be the Kohen Gadol. He should at least be the high priest. So the first thing he says to Moshe and Aaron is, he says to them, like, it's too much for you. You've taken all the power. And like, we're all of us are holy. And why do you kind of lord yourselves over us, as if they appointed and anointed themselves? As we remember, Moshe was the most reluctant of leaders. He tried to get out of it as much as he could, to the point that God got angry with him. So he was certainly not up for a power grab. That was not who he was. So, but Korach's allegation is that you've taken so much power for you, it's too much for you. The whole assembly, everybody is holy, and Hashem is with all of us. And who are you to exalt yourselves over the congregation of Hashem? But really, he wanted to be in charge. What made him think that he was in charge? Does anybody know why he thought, kind of in his mind, even though he would never say it, of why he thought he should be in charge? What was it that, even made him come up with the idea? Most people don't have no reason. They have some reason. Etta.
He was very wealthy. He was part of Moshe's family. Maybe he was older than Moshe. I'm not quite sure.
All of that. He was the wealthiest person among the Jewish people. In fact, there's a saying, I didn't ever grow up hearing about it, but I've heard in the Jewish world, there's a saying, he's as wealthy as Korach, meaning like he's the wealthiest person I know. So that's a thing, is to be as wealthy as Korach. He was a tremendous intellectual Torah scholar. He didn't live Torah. So we've always had that problem. People who were very knowledgeable who did not walk their talk. That's an ongoing human condition. And he was Moshe's first cousin. So Moshe's father, Amram, and Korach's father, Yitzhar, were brothers. And I believe Yitzhar may have been the older of the brothers, that he may have been older than Amram. I'm not sure. I actually have to check and see. That may not be true. But Yitzhar for sure was of a stature and status that was equal to Moshe, especially in his mind. Now think about family issues, especially when people are close and there's who gets what and all of these things. And it had like the makings of a lot of drama to begin with. He was also from the family of Kahat. The family of Kahat, the Levite families were divided by subfamilies. They were each given different jobs. The job of the Kahatites, those people, they were in charge of carrying all of the holy items, the menorah, the ark, the shulchan, the table. They got of all the Levite jobs, some of the other Levite jobs were like carrying the planks of the Mishkan, carrying the covers. Not that those weren't amazing responsibilities, but if you were going to rank them, you probably would put on top the ark, the menorah, the shulchan, gold, all that kind of good stuff. So here's you can almost feel it. They got to carry those things, but they were not the Kohen Gadol to officiate with those things. So the Kahatites may have carried the menorah, but they didn't get to light it. May have carried the ark, but they didn't get to go in the Holy of Holies to be with it. They might have gotten to carry the shulchan, the table for the bread, but they didn't get to put the bread on or take it off or have those jobs. That was the role of Aaron. Okay, so what it really was an attack on Aaron. It really thought, okay, God may have appointed Moshe, but isn't it a little suspicious that the second in charge turns out to be Moshe's brother? Sounds like nepotism. And then when the Mishkan was built, that was Bezalel. That was Moshe's nephew, who God appointed. God appoints all these people. But from the outside looking in, if you wanted to have a gripe, you could say it looks bad to me. Now, did Korach really think that was the case? He didn't really think that. He knew that they were appointed by God. It was very clear. But when somebody is envious, they're, well, hold on one second here. When somebody is envious, I'm just gonna go ahead and mute everybody here, sorry. When somebody is envious, it clouds their perception of reality. In fact, we're taught that there are three things that take a person out of this world. One is honor seeking, envy, and lust. That when somebody wants those things, they are going to be taken out of reality because they're going to misunderstand and misinterpret, and not be through not through lack of intelligence or awareness, that those challenges in and of themselves are going to twist their perception. So Korach comes and he really is attacking Aaron, because later what Moshe says to Korach is, what do you have against Aaron? When he hadn't really said anything. So if you were on page 823, chapter 16, verse 11. So Moshe is talking to Korach, and he says, therefore, you and your entire assembly that are joined together are against Hashem. And as for Aaron, what is he that you protest against him? He hadn't openly said anything about Aaron, but Moshe was able to perceive what the true problem was. He said, you have a grievance against Hashem, and you are making it about Moshe and me and about my brother, because it's really about Aaron, and you are off track. So this is the kind of rebellion. So this is the only type of rebellion and protest where it was 100% Korach was wrong and 100% Moshe was right. All other machlokases, all other debates and everything else are always, even if they're 99.9%, one side is wrong, there's going to be a little piece that is right, a little something, a grain of truth, and not with Moshe and Korach. So this is how this gets started. So this parsha, the parsha of Korach, almost always coincides with Rosh Chodesh, Tammuz. It's either the Shabbos is actually Rosh Chodesh, Tammuz, and so the Haftorah, for example, will be the Haftorah of Rosh Chodesh, but for sure it is at the time of Rosh Chodesh, Tammuz. And we know that this week, Rosh Chodesh, Tammuz begins tomorrow night. Rosh Chodesh, Tammuz begins tomorrow night. It's a 2-day Rosh Chodesh. It is going to be starts tomorrow night, which is Wednesday night. It will be Thursday and Friday, and then we go into Shabbos. But it's always Parashat Korach is around Rosh Chodesh Tammuz. So we're not going to talk about specifically about about Tammuz. We are going to talk about Rosh Chodesh. There's a kind of a bizarre, a little unusual midrash commentary about Korach. As we know, his fate was that he and his entourage were swallowed alive. The earth opened up and swallowed him. It's like a big sinkhole, opens up and closes up over him. So we don't exactly understand all that. There's actually some very interesting things written about it. But there is a very interesting midrash that says that basically Korach is still alive, and he's the closest we could get to of like being in hell. And that he's burning, whatever that means. And that every Rosh Chodesh, he gets turned over, whatever that means. And he kind of rises to the surface, and what comes out of his mouth is Moshe is Emet and his Torah is Emet. That the challenge is that he has to like confess that he was wrong. and that this is done on Rosh Chodesh. Now you could say that's kind of a convenient time, once a month, kind of come out, but like, why is it that it's on Rosh Chodesh? Why couldn't it be on the 15th of the month or the last day of the month or whatever? It's like, what is it about Rosh Chodesh and Korach having to pronounce this truth? Is there a connection? So we're going to add to this question that we know Rosh Chodesh is connected to the Jewish woman. What is it about these three things now? Korach, Rosh Chodesh, and women. What do we understand? Because these things tend to all coincide together. So many people are familiar, I'm assuming you've probably heard, that Rosh Chodesh is set aside as a holiday for women. It is it's a regular holiday. If you would go to the synagogue on Rosh Chodesh, the men are celebrating it as well. There's a special Rosh Chodesh Torah reading. There's a special Musaf service for Rosh Chodesh, the additional service like we have on Shabbos. And the holidays, there is a Musaf service for Rosh Chodesh as well. So there is this connection. It's really for all the Jewish people. But we know Rosh Chodesh was given to women for a special celebration. So women are not supposed to do heavy housework on Rosh Chodesh. We're supposed to, I don't know what we do to celebrate. You can do any number of things, wear nice clothes, have a nice meal, be aware of it. All of that is about Rosh Chodesh. Many women have a custom of getting together on Rosh Chodesh, though I have to say most of those types of get-togethers are short-lived, because since the Jewish calendar obviously is not synchronized with the secular calendar, it tends to break down, because it's like, 1 month Rosh Chodesh is on the 10th of the month of the English month, and one time is the 28th. And people, we have a secular calendar focus, and we like things that happen on secular calendar schedules. It just makes more sense for us. Anyway, that's as an aside, but it still is a women's holiday. The question is why. So we're going to go back to the beginning of Korach, and we're going to take a look at a very special woman who was involved, because it says the downfall of Korach was caused by his wife, and there's somebody else in the picture who was saved because of his wife, and that the woman's connection and the woman's influence was key to this whole thing in history. We already know from last week's parsha of the spies that the women did not participate or respond negatively to the negative report of the spies. They had total faith in God and in Moshe, and were going into the land of Israel. They had no problems with that. They were only 100% with the program. So now we come to Korach. So there is a statement in Proverbs chapter 14, verse 1, that says that the wisdom of women builds her home, and the foolishness of a woman destroys her home. And the question is asked, who's the wise woman and who's the foolish woman? And it points to this week's parsha. So this week's parsha says, who was the wise woman? The wise woman was the wife of On. On, who was initially part of the rebellion. So this is chapter 16, verse 1. Korach, the son of Itzchar, son of Kahat, son of Levi, separated himself with, and here are the people he's with, Datan and Aviram, who were the sons of Eliav, and On, son of Peleth, from the offspring of Reuven. So there was Korach and three main people, Datan and Aviram, who were like the eternal troublemakers, and then On. That's the only time we hear about On. By the time things are kind of heating up, in verse 12, hold on one second.
How do you spell On?
O-N.
So he was Jewish, not Og.
Oh, no. This isn't Og. This is a member of the Jewish people. He was from the tribe of Reuven.
And he was a troublemaker.
Well, he was going to be a troublemaker, but his wife saved him from being a troublemaker.
Oh, we got to hear this story then. Okay.
So that's what we're going to hear. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. So On, it says the next time when Moshe, he sends to summon, this is verse 12 of chapter 16. Moshe sent forth to summon Datan and Aviram, the sons of Eliav, but they wouldn't come up to talk to him. And On is nowhere to be seen from this. So you may have heard, like, what happened? What happened to On? So On is from the tribe of Reuven. Now, everybody is as beloved by God as everybody else. Everyone is equally loved and respected. But there are categories of people who have different roles and responsibilities that gives them more honor. It's just like, that's just how it is. When you are an in charge person, you have the honor that goes with your job. Moshe was the leader. He was the most honored. The Kohen Gadol, the Kohanim, etc., the Levites, etc., and then the rest of the Jewish people. But it didn't matter, like, it didn't mean you were more important of a person, just you had different levels. On's wife says to him, what are you doing? Why are you joining in this whole machlokas, this whole upheaval, this whole rebellion? Right now, you're from the tribe of Reuven. You're part of the regular Am Yisrael folk. You know, you're like an executive vice president. Okay, so that's where you are in the scheme of things. If Korach is successful, he's from the tribe of Levi. You're still going to be an executive vice president. You think you're getting promoted to the Kohen Gadol? It's not going to be you. So what do you have to gain from this whole thing? Like, he's just a rabble rouser. He's just making trouble. He's promoting himself and he's using you. And I was like, that's a really good point. But like, what do? I already promised them like I would show up for this rebellion. And his wife says, I'll take care of it. So it says that she gave him strong drink and he kind of fell asleep. He said, I'll make sure they don't come and get you. Because like they're going to come and get me and I can't say no. Because I'll make sure they don't come and get you. It says that she uncovered her hair and she sat out in front of the tent. It says these men were rabble rousers, but they were from, and that they would never approach a woman who had her hair uncovered. That would be like, Shanda. Okay, foment a rebellion against Moshe, we're good. It says, but a lot of people who foment rebellions have their religious side. But to go to the house when the woman with her hair is uncovered, like I'm not supposed to even look. So they see her sitting out there and they don't stop at his tent. And then they all get swallowed up and she saves him. Says that was the wisdom of On's wife, saved him from being involved with that. As opposed to Korach's wife. Says Korach's wife was like I don't know what you call it, a kochlefel, something that she's like mixing in, trying to make trouble, feeding on Korach's already envious nature, but she made it worse. So what does she say to him? She says, that Moshe, can you believe what he is doing? Look what he's doing. The first thing he did, first of all, these halachas that he's teaching, that he's saying that God said, they don't make any sense. They don't make any sense. And she gives several examples of the laws that don't make sense. She's like, oh, that's a good point. Doesn't make sense. And then he says, and look what he did to you as part of your induction as a Levi. He shaved your whole body. You don't even recognize you. You look like a bald eagle. He shaved your whole head. In fact, the word korach, lehikareach, means to be bald. The word means to be bald. So his name means bald. But it wasn't just Korach who had that treatment. All of the Levites had that. She said, no, he did it to all of them just to cover up that he's really jealous of you and he's trying to get you and he's trying to make you look like a fool. So she was like twisting everything and egging him on. Says that's the foolish woman who destroyed her home, because she and he and all of their possessions, everything is swallowed up. So this is the example that it's given of the wise woman and the foolish woman. And it says it is human nature. It is human nature for a man to be influenced by his wife. This does not mean it's always successful, but all the stories go, you can have a man who marries, a righteous man who marries a wicked woman and he will become wicked, and a wicked man who marries a righteous woman and will become righteous. Does that happen in all cases? We know it doesn't. But the tendency is for the influence of the woman to direct and set the tone of her household. So it's great. This was from a class from Rabbi Daniel Gladstein. He's talking to a room full of men who learn with him. So he says, you guys just need to know. You think you're influenced by this one and that one and all these others. It's your wife. And that's why a man is supposed to pray for a smart wife, to pray for a woman who will not be what's called a tchotchke. You've heard the phrase tchotchke? It's like a tchotchke is like a nothing like decoration, a decoration. A trophy wife, it's like, that's not a Jewish concept. The Jewish concept is a wise woman who will lead her family and influence her husband. As I said, it doesn't always work, but the preponderance is that says if there's when they say behind every successful man is a woman who did whatever, it's like, we mean this seriously. And then it's the woman's role to do that. And she's also supposed to protect that mission. She's supposed to take that seriously and protect that mission and be the person who encourages her husband. And if you don't have a husband, your family, the people's, like, a woman's influence is considered very, very profound. And these women did it, and they did it through their Rosh Chodesh mentalities. The Rosh Chodesh mentalities, and having a Rosh Chodesh means keeping your eye on what is really true. Keeping your eye on having faith and trust in God, faith and trust in Moshe, faith and trust in the Torah, and don't get sidetracked by all these things, like a Korach coming to, on you, or, the spies. Don't do that. Stay in the place of Rosh Chodesh, which is, even if things are looking bleak, they're going to improve. You need to keep your eye on the prize. Last week, we talked about the spies. We talked about Moshe giving a blessing to Joshua, to Yehoshua, changing his name from Hosea to Yehoshua. He changed his name to give him strength, and he prayed for him. But the other person who went on this spy mission was Caleb. And Caleb Moshe didn't pray for him. It's like, how come he left him out? Why did he leave out Caleb? Caleb had a wife who was directing him. Who was Caleb married to? He was married to Miriam. Caleb was married to Miriam. If you're married to Miriam, you don't really need to worry about what direction you're going in. So he was married to her, Etta.
But he went to pray on his own because I think you said that last week, that he was worried. He was very worried that he would have the peer pressure.
Exactly. So he did take matters into his own hands to strengthen himself because he felt himself wavering. But he was sent off with, which also comes from Miriam. If you think about it, Miriam doesn't mean that you're guaranteed success. It means that you recognize when you're in a situation where you need help. So that if you need help, you're like, I'm faltering, that's a sign of strength. So a sign of strength doesn't mean that you are always strong. It means, like, if I'm feeling weak, I know I need to do something. And so he did so on his own behalf as well. But he was married to Miriam. And so he was already in the direction of Caleb, to be like a Kelev, to be loyal. He had that because Miriam was. Now, obviously, that was already his name. It also says, interestingly, not in Torah, but in Divrei Hayamim, otherwise known as Chronicles, it gives a list. It says that Caleb actually had other wives as well. And he was married to very interesting women. He was married to Miriam. He was also married, it says, to Bitya. Who was Bitya? That was Pharaoh's daughter. That's the person who saved Moshe. You ever wonder what happened to her? What happened to her in the whole story of the Exodus? Where did she go? It says Caleb married her. She left Egypt with the Jewish people. And what kind of a person is Bitya? Bitya literally means Batya, the daughter of God. She was a person who went against the rules of her father, against the ethics of the time, against what was the decree of her own father, against society. So Caleb was with the person, married to women who were they? Strong women who knew how to not get sidetracked by the majority. Don't get sidetracked by the majority. And they had strength. And what's interesting, it says that who was Batya? It says she actually had been adopted by Pharaoh. She was an adopted daughter. I don't know from where, but that Caleb was married to her in addition to Miriam. So here are his wives. Like, if this man's not succeeding, I don't know who is. So first he's married to Moshe's adopted mother, to Batya, and he's married to Moshe's sister, Miriam. So that's some really strong women and feminine influence, and that was the success of Caleb, and that he was the one who was able then to speak up, because it's one thing to be able to have strength for yourself to persevere. It's a whole other thing to be a person who can speak up. And that's what Caleb did. And even though in the end he was not successful, the people didn't listen, it didn't keep him from speaking up and taking action. So Miriam and Batya were women who took action and put their money where their mouths were. They walked their talk, and Kalev did too. This is under their influence. It's like, otherwise, who is he? Where did he come from? That he was able to do that. So this is all about the power of women and the power of Rosh Chodesh. Power of Rosh Chodesh. The service of Rosh Chodesh, it says that if we look at each of the services that we have normally on a given day, we have Shachrit morning, Mincha afternoon, and Mariv evening, and that each of the patriarchs was responsible for one of those three services. Abraham was responsible for Shachrit. Hold on a second, let me just let somebody in here. Hold on one sec. Was responsible for Shachrit. Yitzchak, Isaac was responsible for Mincha, and Jacob was responsible for Mariv, the evening service. It says, but who was responsible for the Musaf service, the additional service of Rosh Chodesh? It says Rachel, Rachel. She is always called like the moon. She is compared to the moon. In fact, there's a beautiful gematria. The gematria, the numerical equivalent of Rachel's name of Rachel, is 238. Which is the same as Ki Yareach, like the moon. The word Yareach is one of the words for moon. Ki Yareach equals 238, Rachel 238. That she was like the moon. She was able to stay focused in very dark times and do the right thing in the dark time. And because she was like that, she is compared to the moon. So she says it was in her merit that the Musaf Rosh Chodesh service was created. It was a Rachel service. Okay. In addition to that, there's a service that I'm not sure any of you have ever participated in. You would have to be in the synagogue on a Saturday evening, and it would be after the service and before Havdalah. Have any of you ever been to the Kiddush Levana? Kiddush Levana? Okay. Said, Lynn, were you saying something? I didn't hear you. No, okay. So I'm assuming it was like, what are you even talking about? The Kiddush Levana is the sanctification of the moon. Now, many people are probably thinking, oh, I have done that in services on Shabbos morning when they announce the new moon. That's something totally different. That's called the Birkat HaChodesh, the blessing of the new month that is going to start the following week. So this past Shabbos, there was Birkat HaChodesh. They announced the beginning of the month of Tammuz, but it wasn't already Tammuz because Tammuz is starting tomorrow night. That's when Rosh Chodesh is. The Birkat, the Kiddush Levana is once you can see the new moon, you have to be able to see it. It's very kind of interesting. It's done outside. Okay, so you can't do this inside. You go outside and you look at the moon, and there's a whole series of verses that are said 3 times. There's a whole bunch of things that are said, and that is the sanctification of the new moon. What's very interesting is with all of this focus about women and Rosh Chodesh, is women do not do this service. If you have a women's Siddur, the Kiddush Levana is not even in it. It's not even in the, wait, I'm saying that, let me make sure that's true. I'm just going to double check that just to make sure I said that right. Is that true, Dala? Yeah, I think it's not even in here because women don't do it. Why don't we do it? Says that the whole thing of the Kiddush Levana is praying for the restoration of the moon to its full glory. And you might say, well, that sounds good. Why should we be part of that? That sounds like for sure a women's thing. So it says like we have an unusual relationship with the moon. We have a very unusual relationship with the moon. One of the sentences that is said in this service, it's very short, but one of the sentences that is said is something I know you have heard because it's a very popular song. David David Melech Yisrael Chai Chai V'Kayam. You may have even been in camp and had little hand Chai Chai V'Kayam. David Melech Yisrael Chai Chai V'Kayam. If you went to any kind of Jewish camp or Jewish youth group, you did that. Okay, very, very popular song. What is that? What does that really mean? Most of us probably didn't even really think about it, but what it means is David, Melech Yisrael, is the king of Israel, Chai v'Kayam. He is alive and established forever. So the restoration of the moon to its full glory is associated with the restoration of the Davidic dynasty and the coming of Mashiach, and we say this sentence 3 times. That sentence, that whole sentence, David Melech Yisrael Chai v'Kayam, also has a nice mathematical thing for us. It equals 819. So if you go through, do the equivalent for each of the letters, 819, which is exactly the same as Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh also equals 819. So every time we have a new month, we have the possibility of the restoration of the Davidic dynasty, the restoration of the moon to its full thing. So why aren't women participating? It just says David Melech Yisrael Chai v'Kayam has the same gematria as Rosh Chodesh, and Rosh Chodesh is our holiday. You'd think we'd be the ones leading that out there. So the question is, what is it about this Kiddush Levana, this special service that women are not really part of? This doesn't mean women can't do it. I have done it. Honestly, it's challenging because you're outside and it's in the dark and I always find it hard to read the prayers. Honestly, that's the main thing that gets in my way. But women tend not to be in it. And as I said, it's not in the women's siddur. It's just not something that women do. So we have to ask ourselves a question. We pat ourselves on the back for the fact that we had this wonderful role in not participating in the sin of the golden calf, right? That was so good that we didn't do that. And we didn't participate in the sin of the spies. And we did all these right things. So the question is, how come the men are doing the wrong thing? Like, what happened? How did that happen? So it's like, oh, well, then we have to kind of rewind the story back to the beginning of creation. And who was responsible for introducing the temptation to go off track to begin with? Chava. From the eating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It's like, okay, mazel tov on not falling into the trap, but who was kind of responsible for the trap happening and becoming part of our lives to begin with? It says it was Chava's, it was her. So we have a kind of a, like anything in life, we have kind of a paradoxical approach. The moon being small was considered kind of related to us to begin with. The moon being small, because it says on day 4, that when God created the luminaries, that he created 2 great luminaries, the sun and the moon. And you've probably heard the Midrash, maybe you saw a little child story about it. The moon said to God, it's not fair. There can't be 2 rulers in the sky. And God's like, good point. Make yourself small. Like if that was the result. So it says, so the sun stayed big and the moon became reflective of, it was always reflective, but it used to reflect completely and now it reflects just less. So there is light by the moon. You can see by moonlight, but can you imagine if the moon was bigger and it reflected all of the sun's light? If the moon reflected all of the sun's light, if the moon itself was bigger, we would have more clarity at night too. We would have equal amount of light. It would be reflected light, but it would be complete. It says, who is responsible for that shrinking of the world and the clarity? It says, the woman. So yes, mazel tov on not following. You did a tikkun, so you get a tikkun, so you get Rosh Chodesh. You did the tikkun with the golden calf. You did the tikkun with the spies. You're doing great, but we're not there yet because we still have the situation that there is this force in the world that lacks clarity. So when it comes to going out and looking directly at the moon and talking about this, it's like the women are like, that's a little embarrassing. It's like being confronted with the evidence of your shortcoming directly. So yes, we have the holiday of Rosh Chodesh, but we're not going to go out there and kind of put ourselves literally in the moonlight and talk about this, because it raises the question of how do we get into this predicament to begin with? And the way we got into it was through our collective responsibility on the woman's side. So there will come a time when David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam, David Melech, that the kingship will be restored. It will be back on track. The moon will be restored. And then the full Rosh Chodesh, then Rosh Chodesh, when we come to that and we go out and look at the moon, we will have as much light by moonlight as we do during the day by sunlight. And then we will know that our job has been fulfilled. Until that time, we, yes, celebrate Rosh Chodesh, and it is given to us as a reward, but we still note that there is a discrepancy between the reality and the ideal. And as long as that exists, we kind of stay in the background on that one until we reach a higher level. And in the meantime, what's our strategy? Our strategy is the woman is supposed to work on herself, on her emunah, on her faith, on her trust, on the influence, the positive role modeling that she can do in her family, in her community, with those she knows, of strengthening their faith and trust in God, Torah, the whole thing. That's our role. And when we fulfill that purpose, then we will ultimately see this David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam. But for now, it's kind of a goal that has not yet been reached. So everything about the Kiddush Lavanah is all about the coming of Mashiach. It's all about the restoration to everything in its most perfected form. And the people who have to look at it the most are the ones who have the greatest challenge, which is the men. They have to go out and say, so yes, we may be responsible for it coming in, but they're the ones who have the biggest challenge because they keep getting tripped up by it. So everybody has what to do. So sometimes when I say, oh, the women are at such a high level, we don't have to do anything, it's just the men. It's like, okay, we each have a different task. We need to make sure that our influence is the right influence, because if we go back to say what was the challenge of eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, it wasn't that Eve ate. That could have been forgiven. It's that she advised her husband to eat. And that was the mistake. That's when in business law, it's called detrimental reliance. When the person who is at the higher level, who is the paid person, who's the expert, like if your accountant tells you to do something wrong, or your lawyer tells you to do something wrong, they are more responsible than you are because you relied on their expertise. Adam was supposed to rely on Chava to lead him in the right direction. By leading him in the wrong direction was actually worse than her eating herself. She should have said, I just made a really bad mistake and we need to fix it up, and don't follow it. Don't do as I did. I made a big mistake. That would have been the right thing to do. So that's why the work for the woman is, how are we in our ability to influence? And our ability to influence is only as good as strong as we are. Like you can only give what you've got. So it's like a woman, that's why the work is more internal work. I have to work on myself so that my influence and my role model is stronger and better. And then it is the other person's option to follow us or not. It's not a guarantee. There's no magic bullet. There's no magic pill, but that's our responsibility, is to be that person of influence. Very challenging when there are a lot of other influences out there in the world. So that's why it says specifically that a woman's wisdom builds her home. Like the bayit, the word bayit literally means inside. That's what bayit means. When we go to the parsha of Noah and the building of the ark, it says to put on the outside of the ark, whatever was on the outside, to make it watertight, and then that's called mi b'chutz, on the outside, and babayit on the inside. So it says the woman is in charge of the internal aspect, the internal part of her home. What does her home feel like? You go through your house, you go through your home, and again, this is whether anybody's living with you or not, that we underestimate the power of what radiates from our home, whether people are living there or not. It's almost like people know there's an invisible connection. There's an invisible connection. What does your home feel like? Is it a source of Jewish inspiration, of spiritual connection? What books are in your home? What music is in your home? What magazines are in your home? What's going on in your home? What are the meals like? What's the conversation like? What are the expectations of behavior, dress, what we do? So that's what the woman's in charge of, is setting that tone. Now, if you have teenagers or you have husbands or whatever who are not necessarily on the page, it's like, okay, but it doesn't take away from our responsibility to do our part, because we are called the bait. The word bait is the word bat, meaning daughter, meaning us, with a letter yud in the center, meaning Hashem. We are containing Hashem's reality inside our homes, and our homes are a manifestation of who we are. So we need to take a look around. So I know we like to design and remodel and, get upgrades and do that kind of thing, but it might be time for a spiritual upgrade. It says the woman's in charge of the bait, and a woman's wisdom builds her home. I think it's also not a coincidence that the word for building, which is leave note, a boneh, or bonim are builders, but banim are children. Bonim are builders, banim are children. And it says that's why children are called banim, is that they are the ones who build on that which the parents, and specifically the mother, gives over. So it says our banim need to be bonim. Our children need to be builders. But who are the banim? The children. It's like, well, I don't have children. It's like, guess what? You're a child. We're called Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel. That means that we are the bonim, the Bnei Yisrael. We are the builders of the Jewish people. And we build the Jewish people one home at a time. If there are people in it, great. And if you're the only one in it, great. Whoever you are, whatever our status is, our home is part of what makes the Jewish people amazing. The wisdom of a Jewish woman builds her house. The foolishness of a Jewish woman destroys it. That's our goal, is to remember that, and remember how much power is really in our hand, and to take that seriously, take that really seriously. And I'm guessing not across the board, but in many cases, it's the mom who is like the guardian of the door. You're not bringing that in here. Did you ever hear that when you're growing up from your mother? You're not bringing that in here, and it's, no, what's the problem? It's like, you're not bringing that in here. And it's like, yeah, that's the thing that we say. You're not bringing that in here. That has no place in our home. And we should be saying that about a lot of things. You're not bringing that in here. And we don't mean just like the lost little cat or something. We mean a lot of things not coming into this house. So I think I've shared with you before, this was a long time ago. We were hosting an event, and Rabbi Schwab, who's the head of Beis Yaakov on the west side, it was a fundraiser, or he was coming to speak, but we were hosting, I think he was coming to speak at a chavurah that we had. He was coming to our house. Well, for me, this was like as high, as close as you get to like kind of royalty coming to your house. It's like, oh my gosh, spiritual royalty. Here comes Rabbi Schwab's coming to my house. I walked through my house and I did some editing of what was out at that time. A magazine I was subscribing to at the time, and some other things. I just looking around, seeing like, how does this come off? And I thought, you're a fool. Why are you editing it for Rabbi Schwab? You should be editing it for yourself and your family. So after I moved the things out that I didn't think would be so appropriate for him to know that I had in my house, I thought, if it's not appropriate, if I wouldn't want him to see it, why do I want me to see it? So it's like, what are you doing? So I just canceled the subscriptions, threw away the magazines, put them in recycling. It's like, this is your home. This is a holy place. Would you expect to find it in the synagogue? If you don't expect to find it in the synagogue, it doesn't belong in your home. So it's like, your home is a holy place. How's it measuring up? So that was, it's like, don't bring that in here. That has no place. So this is the wisdom, and this all converges with the wise women, the wise woman and the foolish woman converging in the same parsha with Korach and On ben Pele. So it says On ben Pele. The word Pele means a wonder. that like a miracle, a Pele is a wonder. Says what was the wonders? His wonders were done for him on account of his wife. That he saved his life, and all his progeny were saved because of her. So that we don't even realize the impact that we may be having on other people by what we do. And they say that if you have the privilege of being an aunt or a grandmother or somebody, that it extends to that as well. It doesn't have to be your birth children. It can be other people in your family from the next generation. Even, I have to say, I'm just sharing this just to show you, because you don't know. My niece who lives in Cleveland, who hasn't lived in Denver since she was an infant, and who I rarely see, is making Aliyah the end of in August. So she's going through all her stuff. She's going through stuff at her parents' house, all those things you keep. She sent me the other day a thing that she wrote about me when she was in junior high school in 7th grade, of somebody that you look up to. And she wrote this whole beautiful thing. I'm like, I never even see her. I mean, how does she even, I was totally flattered and honored, and she's the most wonderful girl. But I don't even consider myself that much in her life. But, people know what people are doing. People know. So we shouldn't be discouraged by thinking like, I don't even have anybody who I'm influencing. Is like, don't believe that for 1 minute. She never told me, she's 30, whatever. She was, I don't know however old you are in 7th grade. She never mentioned to me. She said, I just thought you'd be interested in this. And I, appreciate it. And she sent me a copy on the computer. I'm like, wow. So mostly it was like, wow, note to self. Be very aware of the profound influence that you can have on people, and maybe even more so now when we're so connected. Someone you can have a Zoom conversation with, you can have an email, you can have a text, whatever. Our influence is really profound. And we see that to the negative, and we need to know it in the positive as well. A note of encouragement, someone who sees, say, I go to a Torah study class on Tuesday afternoons. Not in a way to brag, but that makes a huge statement. I am a person of my age and stage, and Torah learning is important to me. You don't have to make a whole speech. Just say, I go to a Torah class on Tuesday afternoons. What does that do? You'd be surprised. And it may take years or decades for it to kind of slowly sink in, but the seeds are planted. Seeds are planted. Remember Johnny Appleseed? I used to love that. The story about Johnny Appleseed. Went around dropping apple seeds all over, and there's all these orchards of apple orchards grew. It's like you plant a seed, you don't even think about it, and we don't know what grows from it. So the wisdom of the Jewish woman builds her home. The foolishness of a Jewish woman destroys it. We want to be like the wife of On ben Pele, and we can create wonderful, amazing, miraculous things through the influence that we have on small decisions that we make. Small decisions that we make are going to ripple, ripple, ripple throughout. Thoughts, comments, questions, insights, anything else to share about this? You might want to think about somebody who has influenced you from your life. And I'm going to say specifically a woman. It could be a friend, it could be the mother of a friend, somebody when you were growing up who was just that you looked up to, even in just kind of not that you had a close relationship with them even necessarily, but somebody influenced you. Somebody influenced you to be where you are today, and that you can be that somebody for somebody else. I think for myself about my grandmother, she and her husband, my grandfather, had a men's clothing store. So they worked on Shabbos, and that was not something that they did. But my grandmother would only eat fish or vegetarian out. Now, in those days, that was very hard to do. There weren't vegetarian options every place. There was, in fact, Sometimes you would end up with a bowl of cottage cheese and some fruit if there wasn't something else. But she never, even though nobody else in the family was doing it at that time, only she did. And she was very strong about it. Like, you can go against the crowd. And people say, oh, come on, Julie, you can blah, blah, blah. And she's like, no. So that was her thing. That was her thing. So maybe somebody else in your life was like that for you. Somebody who showed you the way on one thing. It didn't mean that they had to be a saint. It didn't mean that they had to be perfect. It didn't mean that they had to do everything. But somebody influenced you. A woman influenced you to go in the right direction. Something that represents what you're doing now. And the influence that hopefully you're spreading on to other people as well. God willing, Hashem should give us the power to be influenced, to continue the good influence we have and are now, and to recognize and have gratitude for the people who have influenced us throughout our lives. And they don't even have to be living. It could be a biography you read about somebody who did something heroic when you were a child. That's one of the reasons we read about people. That's why we read about the people we read about in Torah, is so that we can be inspired by them. We can learn from their mistakes, and we can be inspired by their heroic action as well. And God willing, we can all do that. And Rosh Chodesh, we will come to a time where the women do say the Birkat HaLevana, the blessing on the moon, because the moon will be at full strength. A woman's influence will be completely corrected and only fill the entire world with light and with clarity, and all of the other mishagas will be banished forever, and we'll be able to say, David Melech Yisrael, Chai v'Kayam. David is king of Israel, the Jewish people. His life is everlasting. Just
Amen.
as we say about the Jewish people, Am Yisrael Chai, and we say, Od Avinu Chai, our father Jacob still lives. Am Yisrael Chai, the Jewish people, is eternal. So we may be shrunk, but we're not ever gone. So even when we look like we're gone, we're coming right back. And that is the message of the moon. We cannot be defeated. There are days when we have to say, I'm wondering if maybe that deal is over. It's never over, because we represent Hashem in this world. The Jewish people represent Hashem, and our job is to make sure that that light, that spiritual light, shines as brightly as possible. And we're beaming that from each of our own individual homes and each of our own individual lives. So it's wonderful to be part of a group of women who, whether consciously or subconsciously, know that and are engaged in that. And we should just have the ability to strengthen one another. Because sometimes it's hard being the lone light bulb, It's like, are there any other lights out there? It's like, I'm not feeling it. So it's nice to come together with other women who are being spiritually inspired and motivated and directing their actions outward and upward and inward and everything else to bring more light into the world.
That was so
Right.
beautiful, Ellen. Yasher koach. So
Baruch
beautiful. I wish I
Thank
wrote every word, but I didn't write it.
That's okay.
I'll remember.
It is recorded, and it will be on the Jewish Experience website if you would like to listen to it again. Thank you for letting me share it so that I can hear it for my own inspiration, because there are some days where it's like, I'm not so sure about this, if this is really working here, but we have the assurance of Hashem that the Jewish people are eternal forever. So just to announce again, to let you know that I will not be here next week, then I'll be in New York with my grandchildren, and relishing having the opportunity to be an influence on them, because I don't get to spend so much time with them. Though I will tell you that this is kind of funny, of our grandson, who's 4, wanted his mother, our daughter, to lie down with him, like on the couch, and like not get into bed, just to lie down with him. He goes, Mommy, we're doing this because we're Jewish, and this is a Jewish thing that's why we're supposed to do this. She's like, how's that a Jewish thing? It's like, because she knows that we like to nap, so that's like a Jewish thing. But he was like trying to feel like, what's Jewish and what's just because you want to. So I thought it was interesting from a 4-year-old perspective of how you identify. Is this Jewish, or is this just what we do? And
That's so cute.
who knows? Yeah. Because
Ellen, any thought of holding class in person again?
yes, but it will probably not be until August. Because my thank God our son Benjamin is doing
he doing?
better, and he
Thank you
is.
for telling us.
So
Tell
he still
us.
does not have any hearing in the ear that lost the hearing. So there's no hearing. The doctors did say that there is still a two more months of a possibility where the hearing could be restored, would be
Yeah.
amazing. And the dizziness and sound sensitivity, he can drive. He drove last Wednesday to go teach his last class in Jerusalem, and he was able to do that. And he went to the hearing specialist, who said that if the hole that they had to puncture into his ear to put the medication in continues closing and closes up, he can fly. So they are hoping and assuming that it will. So they're going to be here for the month of July. So I will not be teaching during the month of July. I will be with them. And when we resume in August, I'm going to try to do something where we are meeting in person, but also a Zoom option, so that I'll have, after those people know how to do that at the Jewish Experience to fix it up, but we will try to reconvene in person as well, but it will be in August. So yes, Etta.
A hybrid.
Excuse me, just a thought. What is your Jewish name?
My Hebrew name is Chayarut. So our son is Binyamin Yisrael ben Chayarut. And your tefillot, your prayers for him would be much welcomed and needed. And he should continue to have a refuah shlema.
Absolutely. We're praying every
Amen.
day.
Thank
Let us
you.
know. I don't want to ask you all the time, so keep us posted. Thank you.
Thank you. We're hoping, so we're hoping that in the next 2 months that his hearing will be restored. And the brain is just so fascinating of its ability to adapt to his new reality and find an equilibrium. So there may be some therapy, like physical therapy, that is involved with that to help him with balance and everything else. But we're just very grateful that was able to drive and that he has the okay to fly.
And
Yes,
what
Etta.
about
Because of a virus or because of an injury?
It's virally caused, but not COVID. So even though there is a hearing loss, sudden hearing loss that is associated with the COVID vaccine, that happens right afterwards, like within a few hours or a couple of days. And he had his vaccine before Pesach. So they do not think that it is related at all to that. It's just, and interesting, it's like one of those things, like I never heard of this before, but the doctors have. They're like, oh, I see this every day. So it's like, really? My goodness. So, he has found it. He's taken the opportunity to use it as a message to focus on the halachas of sound, of which brachot, which blessings need to be said out loud so you can hear your own voice. So interestingly, we know that the Shmona Esrei, the Amida, you need to hear yourself say it, but others are not supposed to hear you. So it's supposed to be in a whisper that you can hear. However, the Shema, which means listen, and the Birkat HaMazon, the grace after meals, those must be said loudly enough so you can hear your voice, which I didn't know. I knew Shema, but I thought Birkat HaMazon was kind of like the Shemona Esrei, that but you have to be able to hear yourself say it. You're talking to yourself. So he's been learning those halachas and using that as an opportunity to grow in that area. So I'm taking
the
it on too.
phantom noises are better?
I'm sorry.
The phantom noises, like in the yeshiva.
No, that's not better yet. The doctor said it could take up to a year for the noise and balance and all those other issues to resolve. So he's figuring it out. I mean, this week is the last week of the American boys yeshiva. So
Good.
the base medrash will be much
Good.
quieter
Good.
after Wednesday. And then he's going to be here.
Good.
So he'll be in the quiet of Denver, Colorado.
No,
then-
that's very good timing.
Yeah, it's good timing. So really, yes.
Yeah, well,
Yes,
send
Etta.
him our love and refuah shlema.
I mean, thank you. Yes, Etta.
I used to teach little kids, and I got one flu after another. This was a few years ago. And one of the flus left me with hearing loss, and that took me six months for the one ear to come back. But
Really?
able to respond. It's one of those things. So hopefully it will come back, but it unfortunately took long and I had to stop teaching.
Oh, I'm sorry for that. But Maine, I hope it does. And, we're so grateful. One of the things that was also interesting is that this virus never affects both ears. It's only ever one ear. Thank God. Thank God. So we're just so grateful because you can function with hearing in one ear. So thank God. We're very grateful. So anyway, all those things to take pleasure in what we hear and that. All right, ladies, thank you so much for joining me. I'll
Thank
see
you,
you in a
Ellen.
couple of weeks.
Have a
And
good trip.
thank you very
Have a
much.
very good trip.
And have a good Chodesh Tov. This new moon, we should come to next Saturday night and we should go out and see the moon and be totally not surprised to see that it got much bigger and that redemption is on its way.
Ellen,
Yes.
Amen.
are you going to send out reminders that you're out of town next week?
Yes, I will. So I will
Okay.
have the Jewish Experience, the Monday email will say, no, Ellen's class is not meeting this week.
Okay.
And my
Be
Thursday
amazed.
parsha class I send that out personally. The reminder for this class comes from the Jewish Experience.
Okay.
So there will be reminders for
Thank you.
both.
And
Yes,
also,
but I'll
Ellen,
miss you.
Okay, well, I'll miss you, but Ellen, did
Yes.
you get any help with making your reservations for Israel when you went last time and your airplane reservations or anything? Did you have any trouble because of the COVID?
So the airline reservations were not the problem then. It was permission to enter the country.
Okay.
So, but that's changed. That's different now. So now you don't need to have the same permission. Now you need to, you have to have your vaccination and there's a test that is done at the airport. So there's other things and I don't know if you still have to have a first degree relative that you're visiting. I'm not sure, they've changed. So you should check into it through the embassy.
I think it's
Through
only
the
groups right
embassy.
now.
I'm sorry, Gabi?
I think it's only groups right now.
Groups, okay.
Oh, groups right now. Okay,
It's
but
groups
go through
people
the
who
Israeli.
or people who have first degree relatives in Israel. So I
Okay.
can go see my children but if you don't have anybody and you're not in a group, then that's going to be a problem.
Well, I have
For
my
now.
family, but I don't know if that's considered first degree. My brother and his children.
Your
etc.
brother is first degree. That's a first degree
Okay.
relative is your
But
brother.
cousins, no? Not cousins.
Cousins,
No.
not cousins, but
No.
brother, yes.
Please
Brother,
keep,
sister, mother, father, son,
But
daughter.
which
Right.
embassy to connect with?
The Israeli embassy.
The Israeli embassy in LA.
Yeah. Yes, that's a good one.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And then, but you didn't have. Did you take United? Do you remember?
I don't remember. Maybe.
Okay. Okay.
I don't
Because
remember.
Meryl and Alex just went and she said they required 13 pages of instructions and this and that. And
Yeah,
not
it's worth
easy.
it. If you want to go, you fill it out. So you fill it out.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you and have a safe trip if I don't
Yeah,
see
and
you this Shabbos.
give
I'll
our
be-
love to
Knowing
Audrey,
I'll be
please.
at Shul on Shabbos. We're not leaving until next Tuesday morning. So
Give our
Okay.
love to Audrey and family, please.
thank you. Thank you so
We
much.
want to see
It
pictures.
was good
of
class.
the
Thank
kids.
you very much.
Yeah,
It's
Thank you
amazing.
so much, ladies.
wonderful
Most
class,
fabulous.
Ellen.
Thanks,
Thank you
and
so
thank you,
much.
Fana.
Yasher Koach.
Baruch
Bye-bye.
Tiyad. Be well,
Yeah,
everybody.
but
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.